Welcome back to the This Week in Fantasy series. I'm your host, VenomousStare. This is the Week 8 preview of the show that's been going on since 2011, a very long time, so let's get right into it. This is going to be a solo episode, so I will keep it concise and hard-hitting. To quickly review the divisions before we move on into the last week review, I have taken sole ownership of the first place in the Cursed Lands division. Christian lost and has moved down into a tie for second with Lily, who is red hot. And speaking of red hot, you got Weston, who's just on fire and has all of his guys coming back. Expect him to go on a huge win streak and be very dangerous. Cursed Land's very stacked. Then we have the Division of Death, which thankfully two of the members finally won, as AB and the commish Clap 4 are 3 and 4 and tied for first. And you can see the hapless teams of Jackson and Spencer are a combined 2 for 12, which I don't think anyone expected going into the season. And finally, perhaps the most surprising thing of all in a very surprising season, Cameron looking very strong, overtaking the incarcerated King of Funny at 5 and 2. No Fried hanging around at 3 and 4, although not looking strong, and similarly Aaron with the huge trade down at 2 and 5. So let's go ahead and talk about that trade before we get into it. I don't need to look it up. Aaron basically received one of his favorite players, Calvin Ridley. And, well, I guess it hasn't gone through yet. So I need to go to my team, I need to go to trades. Oh, there it was. My team. There it is. Okay, Calvin Ridley for Aaron Jones. So this one's interesting. Aaron Jones a little bit banged up, but it's not severe. He's been pretty much great all year whenever he plays. Yet to get below a dozen, except for that last week in Tampa Bay, where I knew they would do poorly and said so on TWIF. And then we have Calvin Ridley, a guy that both Aaron and Ben are very high on. He's put up huge numbers when Julio's out and is still pretty dangerous when Julio's in because they pass so much. But he got banged up with a little foot issue. I don't really think he's going to miss that much time, but it is interesting to note that the week Aaron got him, he got banged up. So to me, even though this trade seems like Aaron lost, Aaron has a very poor record, so he's at least trying to mix things up. But on paper, you're trading a top-tier running back for a guy who is the second option on his team and has really benefited from the top option being out. So I don't know. I don't think Aaron really wins this trade, but he's so far behind that it doesn't matter that much. But I do really like the trades occurring in general. Seeing trades like this happen makes me happy, and it's a sign that the league is healthy and players are trying, even if I do think that it favors one side. So we can go ahead and review the matchups. Ben got trounced by Lily, who put up 104. Lily, again, consistently putting up high points, with Russell Wilson and Todd Gurley carrying the load. Jared Allen really didn't look good at all, even though they were playing the terrible Jets, and that was the defining factor. That and Fells putting up a goose egg. Clap 4 and No Fried. No Fried struggling, obviously, having a few bye weeks with Anna Eckler getting hurt. Pretty much just getting firing squatted here by Clap 4. Tyler Lockett reeled it in 3 times and got 200 yards. And hilariously, they still lost. Shout out to Pete Carroll. And this was a nice start from No Fried, the Jamal Williams Green Bay running back, with the leading guy Rampy just traded for, Adams, getting hurt, but what does it matter? He lost. Bing Bong 3 vexingly picking up a win against Spence here, who is just 1 and 6 and really bad. Spence rolling with Cam Newton here, who I've never liked or believed in, got less than a point. So did Devote. I mean, if your top 2 guys get you less than a point, you're pretty much fucked. As far as Cam goes, DJ Moore, if you watch the Panther game, he did manage to reel in a couple touchdowns. A.J. Brown, this is a guy who is pretty much wide receiver 1 on a Titans team that doesn't actually rely on the run as much as people think. Yeah, they ground and pound. Henry's going to get 20 plus carries, but they're not like inept through the air. They're not a run first. They're not a run only team. They're certainly a run first team, but they're not a team that can only run. Tannehill's very capable, and when Brown has played, he's been really good. So this is one of these guys that Cameron has played, whether he's been healthy or injured, and he's really helped him. Jonnu Smith shit the bed, but he is a guy who gets a lot of red zone looks. And again, benefiting from the underrated Tennessee air attack. Someone's got to catch those touchdowns in between Brown and Smith. It's almost all of them. Cole here for Jacksonville, even though he's had a few 10 plus weeks, I think he's borderline unstartable. Jacksonville looks pretty damn bad, and I don't really have any faith in any of their guys, other than the running back who can be good, but I just don't have any faith in Jacksonville. Talk about a team that collapsed and imploded after that AFC title game. Overall, Cam takes the win here, kind of hilariously over Spence, and not in like a 60 to 65 game. Cam put up 115. The Niners popped off versus terrible New England, and that was like a defining game because these 4 interceptions, of course, had a huge impact on the guy who started the opposing quarterback. Terrible start for Spencer's 6-loss streak, 1-6. Hopefully, Clap 4 and AB cannot throw up all over themselves and not choke that lead away. Jackson, as predicted, was solid, but lost to Weston, who was just absolutely on fire. Hebert looked good versus terrible Jacksonville. Stafford was merely passable versus a poor Atlanta team, and looked pretty bad until the end when he clutched it, when hilariously they choked. If you didn't watch that game, it was classic Falcons. Hebert looks really good for a rookie. Weston's riding the hot hand. Hebert's connecting well with Keenan Allen. I guess it's Herbert. Pardon not having a guest. Carson's still sort of struggling with injuries. If Carson doesn't find the end zone, he really struggles to break 6. This is a running back that relies a lot on finding the end zone to put up points, but he is a prevalent enough option in his offense for that to be a viable strategy. Mike Davis looked terrible, and the Panthers were actually a little bit closer to winning than a lot of people thought. Teddy Bridgewater just got... that's actually this last week's game. That's sort of what's funny about doing the TWIF Sunday morning. The injury and lineups are accurate, but it's sort of weird to talk about the last game because the Thursday night games already happened. But that was the game where everyone knew Carolina was going to lose New Orleans, and they lost, but it was closer than a lot of people thought. Gibson, of course, ran all over the Cowboys. The Cowboys' defense, one of the worst in Cowboys history. Derrick Henry was solid in a loss, but if we just hit the high notes of this game, Calvin Ridley had around 15, which I'm sure was a factor in Aaron trading for him. And Johnson found the end zone twice. Just a mess for Jackson, who, even though he made all the right moves, still found himself losing. Very tough to run into the buzzsaw of Weston, who put up the most points in the league this week. Jackson would have beaten a lot of owners this week. Not Cam, not me, and not AB, but pretty much everyone else. So I actually think that Jackson's team has improved a lot, and he's managing it well, but when you have one loss at this point in the season, what does that really mean? It's very difficult to come back from something like that, but if there was ever a division where it could occur, it was that one. The division of death is certainly terrible. So Christian taking his second loss here. If you look at the history of the last 5 weeks of this 2020 season, Christian has really benefited from luck. Now he's put up somewhat mediocre to above average point totals week to week, but he's played teams who have really thrown up all over themselves. And this week, Christian again put up a middling total at 79. Usually he's been a bit better than this, but AB really popped off. Kyler Murray with a phenomenal day. And the reason he got about 40 is because of these 67 rush yards, 350 plus passing yards, 3 touchdowns is golden. But remember, folks, these rush yards translate at a 10 rush yard to 1 point ratio. So that's why rushing quarterbacks are so good, because that's not the ratio that passing yards translate to. You have to get way more passing yards to get the same amount of points. So players like Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson have a very high floor because they're going to get about 40 rushing yards a game or so, which is, about half a touchdown, which is really big whenever you're averaging out someone's floor and you're considering, maybe they're playing a tough defense and they could have a really bad week. Well, if they're a rushing quarterback, a lot of times, even if their team loses and they do have a bad week, the point total on fantasy isn't that bad. So Tony Pollard, as I predicted, got less than 5. This is an atrocious Cowboys defense. Although Pollard did make a nice play on special teams to prevent them from getting shut out. Oh man, the Cowboys look brutal. I'll talk about that more in the preview. Robinson here popped off for AB. This is what I'm talking about. This is the only guy you want to be starting out of the Jacksonville offense. I guess Minshew on a bye week is palatable. But Jacksonville just looks so lost, I don't see how you could like them. And hilariously, as predicted, this was the week OBJ got hurt. Not that I predicted the week that happened. Specifically, that's pretty much impossible. But I guess if Vontaze Burfict was still playing on the Cincy team, then yeah, it might have been predictable. But in terms of OBJ being injury prone and not a good player, yeah, it finally happened. OBJ banged his knee up pretty bad, and he's hurt again, just like he is every year. And let's just sort of take a look at OBJ. Was OBJ raking before this severe injury? Notice he got put on IR. Season-ending ACL tear, so he fully blew his knee out. Remember, he had that big 33-point game where he embarrassed Dallas, and I said I think Spencer was on that week after. And Spencer is also a guy who is aware of the fact that OBJ is overrated in fantasy. And I said that week, yeah, he had a huge week versus Dallas. They're one of the biggest fraudulent secondaries in the entire NFL. Look for him to suffer in the next week. Look for him to choke. He's not going to reproduce that number. And Spencer sort of pointed out down the season at some point, maybe he might have another 2-touchdown game. But what did we see? Less than 7 both weeks. This is a guy that's been doing this his whole career. Oftentimes in the NFL, there will be very talented players who are maybe playing in a big market team that's bad or just an inept offense, maybe lineman-wise. And even though they're very talented, and when a network like ESPN or ABC has to cover them and their team and hype a matchup, they're the only thing on their team to talk about. So the fan will hear that and sort of subconsciously start to think like, oh, they're so great. Like, all I hear about is how great OBJ is. And that sort of gets ground into you subconsciously, just like any other media narrative you can be pumped full of. And really for fantasy, even though OBJ, might be talented in real life in terms of like catching jump balls or running routes, stuff like this, it's a guy with a lot of issues. Off-field issues, on-field issues, attitude problems. One thing I've said about OBJ, this is a guy with twice of Terrell Owens' ego and half of his talent. OBJ is one of the most overrated players in the NFL, especially for talking about fantasy. You might be saying, hey, you just spent a lot of time talking about this blonde-haired goofball. Well, he blew his knee out, so I'm not going to have to waste any more time on him for the rest of the year. So those are sort of my closing thoughts. Tyreek found the end zone. Hawkinson found the end zone. He actually found the end zone in that closing play that Stafford threw to clutch the game hilariously against the Falcons. Smith-Schuster outperformed Renfro as I predicted. And Will Putz managed almost 10. And Dan Snyder's Deadskins, of course, got 10 plus versus Dallas. That was a smart pickup. So what did we learn about Cgauch's team? Are there really any Cgauch got exposed moments? Well, Amari Cooper is not really going to have much value at all for the rest of the year. Same with Zeke. They both have diminished value. And not because Andy Dalton doesn't have talent, it's because of the line, folks. Tyron Smith is out for the year. Travis Frederick retired last year due to fibromyalgia. Zach Martin is out for the year. This is not the Cowboys line of 2016. This is a deeply diminished line that will hurt the offense across the board. And with CeeDee Lamb really coming into his own, it doesn't matter how many catches Michael Gallup drops. And if they stop throwing the ball to him, now Amari Cooper really has another guy to deal with in the offense, even though there's no tight end. Because, of course, Sharwin broke his collarbone, and the Dalton Schultz fella's terrible. So Chark, like I said, don't really start anyone except for the running back, Robinson. For Jacksonville, they're just a team on the decline. Drake got banged up this game, expected to miss a few weeks, so that'll help old Benny Boy because he has Edwards, or Chase Edmonds, I guess is his name. Kappa. As the Eagles here, who are very good against the run, managed to steal a win against the appalling Giants. Daniel Jones, of course, can't control the ball. This is a guy that really doesn't look like he's ever going to develop from my perspective. When Daniel Jones is in the pocket, it sort of looks like he's playing Counter-Strike with the sound off. He just doesn't really have any sense of when he's going to get flanked. It's pretty terrible. Clyde Edwards-Helaire continues to find the end zone, and Lev Bell didn't really infringe on his carries very much. And this was a game that they aired it out quite a bit. You're sort of worried if you were a Helaire owner, especially if you acquired him recently like Cgauch, but I mean, he still found the end zone on the ground. You love to see that. Cgauch's team let him down in other areas, and it wasn't really close. AB took it to him in a game AB desperately needed to break a losing streak. Finally, we have me scoring 108 plus again, really dismantling Aaron here, leaving no doubt as to who the better owner was and to who deserved to win last year's Super Bowl. Drew Brees did exceptionally well, as I predicted he would. I considered starting Jimmy Joke, but then I just knew that even though Drew Brees had no one to throw to and Chimera was set to have a big day on paper, Carolina was going to lose. And Drew Brees historically plays very well against the Carolina Panthers. So I started him and I was correct. Very glad I didn't go Jimmy G, even though with my margin of victory it wouldn't have mattered. Gardner Minshew again was like sort of mediocre, start-worthy type guy. Thing about Minshew is he's on a team that's not very good, that runs the ball a lot, and he makes silly decisions in terms of interceptions, but they're behind a lot, so they throw, but this is not a guy that I'm really trusting. You know, Aaron's in on it with the gimmick. It's probably why he's 2-5. Remember, this was the week that Aaron had running backs on bye, specifically Cook, who admittedly was banged up, but Singletary really needed to pop off versus the Jets. The Bills barely won that game. That was an ugly game for them. James Conner failed to find the end zone, which hurt him, even though the Steelers managed to beat Tennessee. Fulgham was, decent, but what do you see here from Aaron's team that you love? Gronk found the end zone. I love that. Seeing Gronk spike that ball, I just picture like a yard-deep divot being in the ground after he does it. I just love Gronk so much. And a week later than I initially projected, but Claypool was shit. And maybe my idiocy was saying that he would actually downswing against Cleveland's defense, which is sort of inept. But yeah, Claypool was not going to put up double digits over and over. He might have done it versus Cleveland when they slaughtered them, but yeah, he was terrible, terrible. A receiver has to be really bad to get negative points. That's nearly impossible. And then at the end, Aaron, of course, started the Rams, who actually did pretty well against Chicago. But he got his shit pushed in as expected. So let's move on. Aaron is really struggling. He really needed to win that game. We can just continue here with the commission eye. Sort of like the king and I suppose. Brees is playing a Bears defense that I think has fallen off since 2 years ago, and they were vaunted as being top tier. Tom Triffick's going against the terrible Giants. You got to edge Brady there. Tom has looked very good on his new team. People like Max Kellerman, as well as many others, have been doubting Brady and saying that he fell off for like the last 3 or 4 years. This is the year Brady is going to really look terrible and age is going to catch up to him. It hasn't happened. He's looked great. So advantage Brady. Love him. I honestly hope that Brady is just top tier to like 48. That would just be amazing. Zeke Elliott basically running behind no line against the best run defense in the league. It's a butcher's den. Facing off against McKinnon, a guy who you could almost guarantee is going to get less than 5. This guy is appalling. At least Zeke will get a workload, and I think he might even find the end zone and the Cowboys' lone touchdown. If we look at my bench here, I could roll with Lev Bell versus the Jets, which, if we look at Bell's workload, registered 36 rushing yards on 6 carries and nothing through the air. So do I really want to flip that coin? Bell was horribly inefficient. And on what, 6 carries? Like, that's what I'm more worried about, is the number of carries. So I don't really want to flip that coin. Landry is a pretty, the thing is like he was a little banged up, even though he doesn't carry an injury designation. They run the ball so much in Cleveland. So much. And I could start him because OBJ is hurt. I knew OBJ would get hurt. I said it in the TWIF video. I drafted Landry knowing he wouldn't do shit from wide receiver 2, but OBJ would get hurt. And now he's hurt. And I could start him, but I don't really feel great about that. And then this guy, Justin Jackson, 5 times. Whatever, not really startable. I'm not going to go with Jimmy G at Seattle. And so if we just, obviously Hopkins is on bye, which is sort of why I'm in this predicament. Rolling with Boyd, despite being against a good defense, he's getting a fuckload of targets. AJ Green, one of my favorite players ever, is unfortunately washed. Boyd netted 100 plus and a tutty last week. Traded Weston for him. Really like this kid. Really believe in Burrow. I think Cincinnati went from being dog shit to above average. Or I guess above average is selling it a little too high. Maybe average is the better way to put it if you consider their defense. But offensively, I do like them reasonably. They sort of remind me more of the the prime, like 2012 AJ Green, Andy Dalton, before anyone knew how to stop them. They sort of have that young, plucky feel to them before the sort of gross malaise of repetition really sunk in and affected Green and Dalton. Anyway, if we look at the rest of this matchup, Keenan Allen fully healthy on a team that he's really looking good with in terms of quarterback chemistry, and the Chargers, I think, are building up in a positive way. And Denver's not very good. Don't let that win against New England fool you. New England really is not very good either. I think if Bill Belichick wasn't coaching them, that team would be cellar dwelling. They would be really, really bad. And Ronald Jones is set to have a huge week against the Giants. The Giants can't stop anything. They'll fall behind early. And James White is not a guy you can trust. Not a guy who's broken 10 all year. Only target for 3 yards. This is an emergency play from Clatfor. For weeks, Clatfor has been struggling to find a guy that's startable. He might plug in Devote, who he picked up a mere few hours ago. Devote burned Spencer last week, and he's on a team that's not very good. McCaffrey's still banged up, and Clatfor is waiting for him to play. Offered Clatfor Ronald Jones as well as Landry and Zeke Elliott for a injured McCaffrey, who is playing on an offense with Mike Davis, who could come back and see severely diminished carries or re-injure himself. And Clatfor basically told me to kick rocks. Now, hilariously, we are playing heads up, and McCaffrey's still on the bench because of injury. Godwin's also hurt. Can't really start the Ravens defense because they're playing Pittsburgh. The Ravens defense have been exceptional all year. This is a must-win game for me in terms of division strength, maintaining momentum, and keeping the ball rolling. And if you look at Clapfor's team, even though Tyler Lockett is playing a San Fran team that you look at, and whenever you consider the injuries they have, it makes sense why they look so bad despite making the Super Bowl. But Clapfor declining the trade I offered him for basically two low-end running back tier 1 guys or high tier 2 running backs is, you're playing with fire. Yeah, you're tied for first in your division with a losing record, but again, McCaffrey doesn't play. You're starting two guys who you're going to be lucky if they break 5. White and McKinnon, heavy timeshare, deeply inconsistent offenses, injury-riddled offenses. You just don't feel good about starting either one of these guys. And speaking of not feeling good about starting someone, as I spoke about earlier, Zeke is just not going to do well. You really think that he's probably going to get around 7. But do you roll with Lev Bell against his former team? I think I might. I'll consider it. But my God, he looked terrible in the first game. And I just think there's a really high chance that Lev Bell gets less than 10 looks. And I think that no matter how shitty the Cowboys are, Zeke is going to get 15 plus looks. So I think just mathematically I have to roll with Zeke. And I think, Ronald Jones against the Giants, if you just stack him up against either of these running backs, he's going to just decimate the total. So got to edge myself here. The Bills against New England, I expect the Pats to lose. The Bills didn't look good last week. I expect them to bounce back. Randy Bullock, the Aggie, number 1 ranked kicker in the league, funnily enough, I decided to keep him over Tucker, who is one of the most accurate in the league and a Texas Longhorn. Matt Stafford and friends who failed to pick up Matt Stafford after Jackson dropped him is playing old Spency. And Spencer started Bridgewater, who played on Thursday Night Football, and poor Teddy Bridgewater and his mediocrity. That poor bastard always manages to get brutalized. The defining play for him in this game was this goofy run play where the pocket collapses and it's 3rd and 4 or 2nd and 4 or something, and Bridgewater tries to run up the gut, and a defensive tackle who's being blocked blatantly trips him. Not just in the foot, but basically kicks him in the crotch, sticks his leg all the way out at a 90-degree angle and trips Bridgewater. And as Bridgewater's going down from the dirty trip, which obviously is a penalty, he just gets annihilated by this massive tackle, or a 300+ pound defender. He's going down and just gets belted in the ear basically and has to come out of the game. Didn't look the same after. Didn't really look good before either, frankly, but as a Panther fan, I just hate to watch Bridgewater. He's not very talented. Gurley found the end zone. David Montgomery will struggle to break 10. They give this bastard the ball a decent amount and give him a reasonable amount of looks, but even through the air, but he just really isn't talented. And the Bears' offense is sort of inept in general. I don't really trust starting any of them, I guess would be the first person way to say that. Jonathan Taylor, basically if you're wondering why Hines never breaks 3, this is why. Taylor's the guy that gets the carries. And good for him. Coming off a bye, should be fresh. Playing a bad Detroit team. Detroit's record isn't that bad, but they're still pretty shit actually. He should do better than Hines. If you look at Spencer's bench here, Motzer's hurt on IR, Thomas is still out, hilariously, Sanders is out, and that's really the crux of the issue is the Sanders injury. Notice Goddard's hurt. So if have I been saying Dallas Goedert for the Cowboys? We have to just go ahead and pause for a second. Who do I really mean? Dalton Schultz, right? Yeah, maybe I have been saying. I can't tell if I've been saying the right thing or not. No guest on MP4, so they're in the same division. They're both sort of substandard backup tight ends. both white guys, same initials, Dalton Schultz, Dwayne Goddard, not really, LOL, Dallas Goddard. Anyway, similar. Speaking of similar, these teams are both similarly uninspiring this week. And if we look at Lilly's bench, Fuller and Gonzalez are both on bye. Crowder is still hurt. I guess you could move in Diggs. I mean, I would. I certainly would. He's healthy this week. Give me a break. Consistently getting a lot of targets on a team that is getting better at passing. Jefferson popped off last week. Or I guess he was bye last week, but the week before he got 30, which is what I was thinking of. I expect him to do well again. Andrews versus Pittsburgh, that's not a good matchup. Jared Cook definitely favored. Boston Scott versus Dallas, Jesus, that's going to be huge. And, of course, Spencer intelligently scooped up Tucker pretty quick, and good for him. The only reason that I elected to keep the Aggie kicker Bullock over Tucker is this late season schedule. Bullock's was, I thought, more favorable, and Bullock was ranked higher. And really, this Dallas game was the only one where I would have wanted to keep Tucker, and I didn't think it was worth rostering him through Pittsburgh, Indy, and New England, who I think will at New England by week 10 when it will be cold. I think they'll have their shit together enough for him to not have another big week. Against Tennessee, at Pittsburgh again, that's a lot of tough games, so that's why I rolled with the number 1 ranked kicker over the number 9 ranked kicker. But good pickup by Spence, and obviously Spencer's very on top of his shit, and he's going to plug him in. If we just look at this matchup overall, obviously Spencer just desperately needs to win it. He's on a 6-loss streak. This is a guy who had his first losing season last year, and really, if you just look at it mathematically, he can only afford to lose one more game, because once you lose 7, the best you can do is 500, and I don't think Spencer will be satisfied with a 500 season, so you got to consider he's in a terrible division. And I don't mean that as a slight to the intelligence of any of those owners, but if you just look at it mathematically, we can take a look right now, in fact. So if we zoom out a bit. So let's just look at points for. This is the total points the teams have scored this month, or not this month, but this season rather. All of the teams in the Cursed Lands division have 700 plus. None of the teams in this division do. And hilariously, Cameron is the only one in the bottom division. AB is close, of course, but you know, if Ted Williams had batted .399 in 1941, they wouldn't have said he was the last guy to bat .400. So if you just look at points for, which I know a lot of the purists who are really by the numbers type guys love points for, they don't really care so much about record. I know that if you go to this breakdown stat, let's see. This is a fun little tool, by the way. Overall win-loss, Weston doing very well, who hilariously I think looked pretty weak up until these last couple weeks. Again, this is something that wasn't exactly coming out of left field if you just looked at the people he had coming back and just his general intelligence as an owner. He was a guy who was going to go on a run, and he's just red hot. Like I said last week, expect him to win a bunch of consecutive games, and if there was a way to bet on this league, you would want to bet him. So, yeah. Obviously, these last few weeks he's been red hot. I've been very good, obviously, but if we scroll down to the bottom, Clap for, Spencer, Aaron, this is sort of interesting. And Ben actually around the middle of the pack here at 7, right around AB, with this aggregate overall win-loss. You know, take that for what you will. Coach. I don't know, like, what the hell this means, honestly. This is like one of these, like, war-type formulas. But Cgauch is at the bottom, and I feel like he's actually done a pretty damn good job managing. He's the second best team this year. He was the second best team last year, so true. Again, it shows Weston being at the top with me right behind him. I feel like these are the stats that whenever Spencer is having a very good year, he always cites, like the breakdown record and stuff. But now that he's not having a good year, and it's not just luck, like obviously there's injury luck and stuff, but he's down there at the bottom with the aggregate record. So the breakdown, I guess, is kind of interesting to look at. Certainly more interesting than the true. So let's just conclude this. Let's see, where were we? I definitely predicted myself to win this. It's a must-win. So we were here at this very weird game. Now, if you look at the keys to winning, Adams just had a huge week last week, and he's going to need to replicate that for Spencer to win. Spencer already benched Ryan, who had about 18, and remember he had Bridgewater, who had 12. So I'm going to go with Lilly here. I actually think Russell Wilson will have a phenomenal day. He's going to light it up. Carson's sort of a little bit banged up coming off of an injury. And I think Jefferson will have another good day. Andrews will find the end zone. And Lilly will roll on and continue to pressure Cgauch. I expect Spencer to score 88. Red Hot Weston versus Billy Bean's boys. Incarcerated Funny. Hebert, we don't really need to spend much time on this because we should really look at the benches first. I should zoom in again, probably. Boomer vision here. David Fells, bye. Johnson, bye. And fuck the Texans for having two running backs named D. Johnson, by the way. And being like equally mediocre. Edmonds, very good because Drake is hurt, but on bye. Scary Terry, bye. Nick Chubb, hurt. And Joe Burrow facing Tennessee. So the King of Funny has no bench to work with. Philip Lindsay's questionable with a concussion issue. And Benny Snell hilariously had to be picked up. I don't know why I clicked that, but vexingly, the top three running backs, anytime they were attempted to be picked up, they were waiver requested until November 4th, which is, I guess, because people had them before, but that's really weird, so forced me to go with Benny Snell. Cole Beasley is on a team that is looking very good this year, and despite not looking very good versus the Jets last week, they're going to look good versus the Pats, fellas. A lot of people point out that Belichick never really loses 3 straight. He doesn't really go on loss streaks. I think Cam Newton's going to have another poor performance, and I think if you are riding with the Bills here, you've got to feel good about yourself, at least as you would feel normally. Bills versus Patriots, if you just look historically. AK, if you were starting a Bill in like 2014, 2015, 2016, you would definitely be much more squeamish. Evans set to have a huge day versus the terrible Giants. You've got to love that. Julio Jones didn't find the end zone, but was just gashing the Panthers defense. And Mike Davis was fumbling the ball around like a putz. Started to rain. Slayton's not very good, but the bench is sort of jammed, and Michael Gallup's not any better. Rodrigo Blankenship with the goggles and the easy matchup. You've got to love that. Gostkowski, I think they're going to have a shootout versus Cincy. I said Cincy and the Browns are going to have an exciting shootout game last week, and I was right. There's been a lot of I was right talk. I suppose that's what happens when there's no guest to say that they were right. But Gostkowski will put up good totals versus Cincy here. The only thing I worry about is, they get a bunch of, it's like a 35-27 game and a bunch of PATs, but I'm sure he'll get a field goal or two. Gostkowski, he's not even ranked top 10. I remember puzzlingly Weston, I was trying to trade him, and I offered to throw in Tucker, and he was like, I've got the best kicker in the league already. I was thinking what? Anyway, it turns out to be Randy Bullock. You think an Aggie would know that. Chiefs are facing the terrible Jets. They'll feast. Although, hilariously, Dallas is facing off against the Eagles, and Cgauch dropped the Eagles' defense for whatever reason. This is like a must-start. Dallas has looked atrocious. Eagles have one of the best rush defenses in the league, and the Dallas Cowboys really rely on running it, and they have no line. Ugh, I just don't see how the Eagles don't do well here. Zeke has had fumbleitis. The backup quarterback, the third string, 7th round guy for the Cowboys is going to start. You just got to sort of raise your eyebrows at Cgauch dropping him. But honestly, both these defenses should get 10 plus. Henderson against Miami. Remember, this is the guy that I traded Boyd for and rushed for 15 times. So he's getting a look at that and caught both of his targets. So he's getting a reasonable amount of looks, but it's a pass first offense. And if you just look at this game, Ben is without a lot of weapons and is dealing with injury to Nick Chubb still, and is really just trying desperately to cobble together a lineup. I mean, what do you do if Lindsey doesn't play? Seriously, like, who do you even go with? Is it even worth starting a guy when you're facing off against Weston, who's certainly going to score a bunch? You really want to drop one of these guys? You have to consider that the top 3 options on paper are like waiver blocks, so Ben is dead in the water. 100% Weston will win. Here we go. Cgauch, who is currently tied for second in the division against Aaron. Rodgers will do well against a struggling Minnesota team. Jared Goff will do well against Miami. Cook is questionable. This is sort of funny that Jones is out and playing. Full participant, so he'll play. Who will Rampy start? Singletary against New England. And he'll get outperformed by Edwards-Helaire with an easy as fuck matchup. You know, I sort of have a hunch that Bell is going to like catch a screen pass in the first half against the Jets for a touchdown, and it makes me want to start him, but I just know that he doesn't really get the consistent looks to warrant that. But I also know that Zeke faces a very tough matchup against Philly, and man, it's just going to come down to a sort of noon decision on what I do, but I just really feel like if I plug Lev Bell in, it's going to be a 3-point game where he gets like 6 looks again, so that's pretty terrible. Amari Cooper, virtually no value. Fulgham, I mean, if ever there was a week to start Fulgham, it would be this one. He's been better than I thought, actually. Look at this, look at that end zone. 11 targets, hell yeah. Roll with him. Good pickup by Ramp, I suppose. He'll definitely outperform Cooper, who's in an anemic offense at this point. Cowboys fans really need to have it hammered into their head that it's the offensive line that made the Cowboys good in the first place, as well as why they're bad now is the lack of line. Higgins, Cincinnati versus Tennessee, you don't love to see that. And I expect him to get outperformed here, definitely, by Gronk, who unfortunately is a little banged up, but he's 8 targets. Holy shit. Yeah, keep rolling with him. Love that. Especially considering Dalton Schultz is the other guy. To even have this guy rostered, yeah, I know he's ranked 10. Remember, that was with garbage time Dak, just like dumping him the ball. Look, guys, this is not worth rostering, I think. I guess you could argue since Gronk has had injury issues, but whatever. I just don't have any faith. Basically, the value in all of the Cowboys' weapons went down to a point where guys like Zeke and Amari Cooper went from being tier 1 to, I think it's hard to say, and sort of debatable whether they went from, obviously they were tier 1, but whether they're now like low tier 2 or like unstartable, or is a guy like Zeke who is still not going to get time shared, like is he mid tier 2, high tier 2, like it's hard to say. It depends on how much you think the line will improve, but a lot of fraud in general, I would just say, just as a blanket statement about life. Higgins here, I mean, do you love starting T. Higgins? He's gotten some targets and certainly gotten his points, but I don't know. Do you love that? T.Y. Hilton's basically brain dead. Drake is hurt. He picked up Madison, who isn't going to get any looks because of Cook coming back. So what do you really say about this Cgauch team? Well, Rodgers will do well. Running backs will do well. You hate the receivers. The kicker already locked in a good game. And with Jones being hurt, obviously Singletary will play. I don't know. This is weird. Connor with a bad matchup. Cgauch is really favored. I just feel like it's going to be impossible for Aaron to get over this running back hurdle that he has to deal with from Cgauch, because both of Cgauch's running backs are playing in favorable matchups where they're going to get a lot of looks, and Aaron Jones is hurt. And how has Singletary looked this season, you might be asking. Well, despite being on a phenomenal offense, he's only found the end zone once, which is really his effective point last year, was finding the end zone. So that comes a lot down to the Bills having a lot more receiving options, and has been a large part of why Allen has actually developed. So I think that will actually be the crux of why Aaron loses, with Cook coming off of this injury. And remember, Cook was phenomenal last year, and he's been very good this year, but definitely a bit diminished. I actually am going to give the edge to Cgauch because of the running backs, and because CeeDee Lamb went from being like a low, I would say like a high tier 2 guy, to not that good. Not that good. And with Connor having the tough matchup, it really hurts his value. I think Cgauch will be able to win here behind his running backs. And Aaron just has to win this week. Really sucks that he made that trade for Jones. Really had to have the victory. It's still lost, and he's like probably going to lose because Jones won't play. At least according to the computer. So here, AB, again, another week where we look at the bench first. Frank Gore dealing with an injury. AB still suspended for AB apparently. I don't know what the issue with this is. Fantastic in first day with team. Pending his reinstatement by the league after week 8, Brown will be eligible to make his debut against the Saints, it said. So that's next week. Okay, so AB's out for sure. Speaking of out for sure, Robinson and Kyler Murray are both out, which are AB's best players. Holy shit. Austin Hooper's also out. Remember, OBJ got hurt, so he would have had increased value. Jeffrey's out against Dallas. I mean, my God, if you were gonna keep Alshon Jeffrey roster, you would want him to play this week against Dallas. Frank Gore, that's great. He's splitting carries. He's on the worst offense in the league. So AB's entire bench is basically fucked. And if you look at the other bench, I mean, this guy being on bye is nothing. You have every fucking street to work with. Moore already locked in 5. I mean, I say every street to work with. Cameron could wake up Sunday morning and have like Hall of Famers with locked in point totals that he could retroactively move in his bench, and he wouldn't know the difference probably. So I just feel like this is definitely an optimizer, a guy who wakes up and just clicks the green optimize button a lot of the time. I was on the mobile app the other day, and there was this new feature I was prompted to use that said like auto inactive swap out. Like, holy shit, how brain dead can you make this? It's not fantasy baseball, it's fantasy football. Like, check it once or 2 times a week, for Christ's sake, if you're a casual. It just blew me away that existed. Like, the Snickers optimize button is like the control army hotkey in StarCraft. Like, it's sort of like too newbie friendly, I feel like. Anyway, AB's just going to get butchered. Is there any way he wins? Derek Carr is playing against a soft defense. I mean, Mixon's ruled out. AB doesn't have a fucking second option. Frank Gore, Frank Gore. If, like, best case scenario, Frank Gore gets a dozen. And Tony Pollard's terrible. Best case scenario, Zeke fumbles 3 times and he, like, gets benched. Like, really, the only win condition AB has is Tyreek Hill having a 30-point game versus the terrible Jets. And he's even having to start Renfro here. It's just really, really going to be ugly. Sometimes in fantasy you have weeks like this where a couple really big bye weeks hit and a couple injuries hit too, and you're almost just fucked. So AB's fucked. And that sucks because he had a big win last week and he really wanted to maintain the division lead. Thankfully for him, Clapful will probably lose this week to me. Okay, so Jackson looked very good last week, and he's playing a pretty weak no-fried team. Mahomes is going to light up the Jets. Fournette's going to light up the Giants. Well, as much as you can light someone up in a timeshare, I suppose, but they're probably going to be running it a lot because they get ahead. Williams will get a lot of touches because of the injury to the running back. What is this fucker's name? Aaron Jones. I called him Adams earlier, obviously confusing him with Jamal Adams. Aaron Jones. My bad. Alright, so obviously since Aaron Jones won't play, Williams is going to get a lot of touches and look good. And if you compare them to motherfucking Gio Bernard, who's not good, and this guy who has a beehive on his head and is splitting time with like 3 other dudes, yeah, who do you think is favored? It's pretty obvious. Higgins and Cup. Ridley locked in less than 5 and got banged up. I mean, I don't even need to talk about this. No Fraud should win. Jackson should lose. And Jackson got it with the Gibson bye and a Kirk bye. Kirk's gotten a lot of fucking targets and has had 2 big weeks, so. Or at least red zone looks. So that's the TWIF. If there are any takeaways, I would say that if we just look at the league here, me maintaining my division lead is important and likely. The division of death is definitely suffer some more losses this week. And I think really the narrative of Cameron winning, and he has a really easy matchup this upcoming week and looks like he's really going to be able to take it down. You've got to look at that and say, especially with Ben sort of struggling and looking like he'll definitely lose again this week, man, Cameron's in pole position because Aaron and No Fried also look non-threatening. All Cameron has to do is like hold his dick and not fuck it up pretty much, because his competition is very rapidly waning. And if we look at the competition of this league in general, it's insane how top heavy it is. If you look at the Cursed Lands division, I haven't really relinquished my throttle on the league since I won the Super Bowl. Cgauch hasn't relinquished his second place position since he was 15 years old. Matt Stafford and friends has looked great, a team that's very dangerous and puts up a lot of points. And Weston, despite looking weak early, has the most points scored in the entire division and is just red hot right now and is on a complete tear. So that might actually be teams 1 through 4. I might transpose Weston and Lilly because of how hot Weston is right now. I might even put Weston at 2 if you just look at danger right now, but this might be the first time ever that the top 4 teams are all in one division. Because if you look at Cameron's team, the first half of the season he was carried by Dak. And then he got, obviously Ryan Tannehill is another sort of guy you can just rely on, but running back wise, Chimera's great, and because of Michael Thomas fucking up, Chimera's gotten a lot more looks than usual, but is AJ Brown top tier? No, he's overperformed. DJ Moore is not very good. He's starting a Detroit running back. He literally has the entire Detroit backfield basically. And Melvin Gordon's decent, but I think Lindsey is a threat to him. I just don't look at this team and think that it stacks up equally compared to the other teams. And I've been doing this show for nearly a decade, and I've seen Cameron go out to 4-1 leads, 4-2 leads, 5-2 leads, 5-3 leads in divisions. And when he's through with the bye weeks, he always chokes the division lead away. Now what's hilarious is he could even lose a bunch of consecutive games and still probably maintain the division lead if you just look at the momentum of the teams in his division. But, I mean, Ben's only 1 game back. He's almost... But you really have to consider that, yeah, okay, the division standings are the way they are, right? But there are a lot of games this week that due to bye weeks and injuries are going to be butcher's dens. They are highly favored in one way. Ben's matchup is like this. He'll lose for sure. And that's really important when you consider this division. So Cameron, I think in the history of this league, has never been in a better position to not only make the playoffs but win the Super Bowl. As weird as that Cameron winning the Super Bowl, literally just saying that broke my brain. Like, you heard me trying to, like, just say anything about it after that. Like, it's a mind fuck to even consider, just to put it bluntly. This is a guy with the worst winning percentage by far, someone who's never won a Super Bowl, and someone who's never had a winning record, and someone who's starting a inactive person within the first 4 weeks. So for Cameron to take the division for the first time, and Cameron in the playoffs, there's a fucking novel idea. Very bizarre. So make sure you leave a like rating, and if you made it this far in the video, leave a comment that says easy.